back to History Unpacked, the podcast where we break down major moments in history and explore their lasting impact. I'm Tobin.
And I'm Noam. Today we're diving into a significant event in Canadian history, the October Crisis of 1970. If you've ever heard of it, or only know its bits and pieces, don't worry. We've got you covered. This was a time when Canada faced political turmoil, violence, and a test of its democratic values.
Exactly. So, to set the stage, it's October 1970. We're in Quebec, a province with a strong, unique identity, historically, culturally, and linguistically, distinct from the rest of Canada. There was a growing movement for Quebec's independence from Canada, and tensions were high.
Right. There had been decades of frustration among many Quebecois who felt that the federal government wasn't respecting their culture or giving them enough autonomy. Now, while some wanted peaceful reforms, others, like the Front de Libération du Québec, or the FLQ, wanted more drastic action.
And that's where things get really intense. The FLQ was a radical, separatist group that believed in using violence to push Quebec towards independence. They were involved in a series of bombings and violent actions leading up to the October Crisis, but in 1970, they escalated their tactics in a shocking way.
They sure did. On October 5th, the FLQ kidnapped British Trade Commissioner James Cross, and just a few days later, on October 10th, they also kidnapped the Quebec Minister of Labour, Pierre Laporte. Now, this was the point where the situation went from a series of isolated incidents to full-blown national crisis.
Exactly. The FLQ demanded the release of their comrades who were in prison, along with other political concessions. They also wanted a plane to Cuba for safe passage. The Canadian government, led by Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau, was under enormous pressure to act.
Right. And that's where Trudeau's response became one of the most talked about aspects of the October Crisis. He invoked the War Measures Act, which is essentially martial law. It gave the government sweeping powers to arrest people without any charge, search homes, and limit civil liberties, all in the name of national security.
And it wasn't just the FLQ members being arrested. Thousands of people in Quebec were rounded up, even though many weren't involved in the FLQ at all. It was a deeply controversial move, especially among civil rights groups and Quebec nationalists. Trudeau was criticized for going too far and curtailing freedom.
It's a tough call on one hand. The government had to respond to a violent, potentially deadly situation. But on the other hand, it raised important questions about balancing security and individual rights. It's still a debate today.
So, the government's response was swift. After about 2 weeks of intense negotiations and a lot of back and forth, the FLQ released James Cross on October 28th. But tragically, on October 17th, Pierre Laporte was found dead in the trunk of a car. Having been murdered by the kidnappers, that really shocked the nation.
And let's not forget the human toll here. Laporte's death was a devastating blow, and it made the government's decision to invoke the War Measures Act feel more justified to some, though still hard. The crisis ended in December, when the FLQ members involved were arrested, but the impact still lingered.
Yeah, for sure. The October Crisis is often remembered as a defining moment in Quebec's history. It solidified the idea that there was a real radical separatist movement, but also showed the lengths to which the Canadian government would go to preserve unity. The debate over Quebec's independence didn't go away after the crisis, though. In fact, it led to 1980 and 1995 referendums on sovereignty, which are still a big part of Canadian political life today.
It also changed how Canadians viewed their rights and freedoms. The War Measures Act was seen by many as a necessary evil. But it was also a reminder of how fragile democracy can be in times of crisis. And while the FLQ itself disbanded, the legacy of the October Crisis has remained a touchstone in the national conversation about Quebec's place in all of Canada.
There you have it. A quick look at the October Crisis, a dramatic, tense moment that showed both the fragility and the resilience of the Canadian society. If you want to dive deep into the political aftermath or hear more about the role of Trudeau, let us know. We'd love to explore it further.
Thanks for joining us on History Unpacked. We'll see you next time with another pivotal moment in history. Until then, keep on learning and stay true.